if your resting place is in a rib flare, which generally talking about the anterior front side of the rib cages flaring out this way, which puts extension into the thoracic spine. If that's kind of where you end up a lot of your day, that's the posture that feels most natural to you, it might be useful to invite in a little change there, and here's a few reasons why. The natural curvature of the thoracic spine is a convex curve, so there is meant to be, right, a curvature, a rounding through the upper mid-back. Right, we have an alternating set of curvatures in our back. So our cervical spine is a lordosis, right? It's concave. Then we have the convexity of the thoracic spine, the concavity of the lumbar spine, another lordosis here, and then the sacrum and the coccyx at the bottom is kind of a fixed kyphotic curvature, which is again that convexity. And so the thoracic spine is meant to be a convex curvature as well. But if you kind of look at my spine, it's all almost one flat thing from the way I've trained. This is what I've ended up with. But it's really useful to have the natural curvature of your spine because it helps distribute forces to the body. It's alternating arches, right? Like any bridge, it helps distribute forces across the structure. So there's one reason of, a lot of, there's just a biomechanical reason that you'd want to distribute forces through the body a little more evenly. If you don't have that in the flat spine, that might be something helpful. Now, another reason is that our sympathetic nervous system, which in its overly stimulated state is what we think of as fight or flight. The sympathetic nervous system, a lot of it begins and is concentrated in the thoracic spine. Now, since we are naturally in more of a convex curvature of the thoracic spine, if we are living, right, in extension in a different curvature, we can compress on a lot of the nerves there, and that means that we're constantly in a state of stimulating those nerves that are responsible for that overly alert state, the fight or flight like state of the nervous system. So we might notice that as a result of just the position of the back here and what nerves are being compressioned and tensioned. Right, so that's another reason. And then just by having this extension in the spine all the time, which again isn't really the resting place of the thoracic spine, all these muscles in the back are always active, right, to keep you in that extension. And so by restoring some curvature in the back, we can allow them to relax a little more, which is also going to help the nervous system relax. Right, so there's different ways that you can bring some curvature into the thoracic spine. You can go check out the video where I show some mobility drills, which are a little more active. There's ways that you could, get the front body to tension so the back body creates a little more slack there, right? There's different approaches, but this one is really about giving yourself some sensory feedback and familiarity with the curvature of your back. So what we're going to be doing is finding a position where we can get that curvature in the back and then holding for time so that the body has just a lot of time to not necessarily be doing, but just sensing how it is to be in that place, building familiarity with it. So I'm going to show you a few options, but I encourage you to play around with where you feel, right, the stretch in the upper mid-back and staying with that. We could do this in side body capacity. We could do it in rotation, but it can be really helpful to isolate just this flexion of the spine because we're not necessarily trying to push the rib cage one way or the other, or rotate in one way or the other for our resting state. We are trying to restore that flexion of the thoracic spine in its resting state. So that's the shape we're going to create. You can do this with a pillow. I have a bolster here, but a pillow works great. I'll sandwich it between the thighs and the torso and find a more rounded child's pose. And you can see that, right, the curvature in that mid and upper back is changing a lot here. Now, you might find that the head is a little floaty in that position, right? My head doesn't quite rest down naturally, so I might take something, could be a book, it could be a block if you have it underneath the forehead, so that just feels a little more grounded. And it might even just be a blanket that wants to come between the head and the floor. Arms can go wherever they're comfortable. All we're looking for is just that rounding in the upper and mid back. And so while you're here, right, you'll breathe into the upper back and breathe out, just relaxing, weighting yourself into the floor. Right? So really focusing the breath where you have space, which when you're in that compressed position against the bolster, there's less space to expand here. Sending more of that expansion into the back body, right? You could even give yourself more feedback there by placing something on the mid back and breathing into that pressure, right? Even just draping a blanket over that area might be helpful, because really our goal is sensory feedback. So giving as much information as you can to that area of the body. Now, another way that you could do that is just up against the wall, right? Finding a little space between your feet and the wall so that it's the upper mid-back area that is grounded, and that way you might have more feedback to expand the breath if it was difficult to find the breath without any connection to the backs. So that's something you can try, although it's a little less relaxing being upright. And then the last one that I'll offer to experiment with is in a forward fold, right? The legs could be straight, they can be bent, they can be open. The legs part doesn't really matter. But you'll take a block, maybe two, and rest the chest on it, right? So resting the chest down on the block is gonna create a lot more curvature through the back, and the knees can be bent. That's pretty low, so you might want to create a stack for yourself. I have one block here and one block I have found for my position. I need the block at a slant to create the right position, but you can see that, right, my sternum, my chest is connected to the block to really emphasize the rounding in the upper mid back. And then same thing, I'm breathing into the back ribs, creating more space there, getting familiar with that shape. Right, play around with what's going to work for your body, what's going to create space in the back ribs, restore some curvature there. Again, the shape isn't so important, but giving yourself time to be in that space to really experience it and get familiar with that different position of the body is very helpful. And know that since it is probably now an unfamiliar shape to be in, that you want to give yourself time in the aftermath of it to maybe, right, move gently. You can play around and see if the rotation of your spine has changed anymore, if maybe even extension feels more free after that flexion, and yeah, just notice the change.